Hello, and welcome to the C3Method Podcast with your host, Robert Polenick. Our goal is to educate you on everything health and fitness related with a clear, concise, and customized approach. We want you to know what you need to know and how to apply it in a way that fits you best. Today's podcast number 2314. We're going to be asking the question of what matters most. Is it nutrition, training, or supplements? I asked this question recently on our Instagram channel, and as I would assume your answer was, everybody answered nutrition. When we're given those three subject matter, if we're looking at nutrition, training, supplements, methods or kind of areas we can focus on to produce the outcomes and goals that we want. Nutrition, training, and supplements. Most people will answer that nutrition is most important. Why I wanted to discuss this today, though, was that answer is not always nutrition. It's not always true that that's the answer for everyone. I have worked with over 3,000 people in a 25-year career. I started training people when I was 16. I am now 42 years old, so I've been doing this for a while. It's been my main source of income. It's what I do for a living. I've gotten to work with a lot of people, all the way from beginners, people where they're learning the difference between a dumbbell and a barbell, all the way up to professional athletes. Whether that's IFBB pros and aesthetic pro cards. We also have strength sport athletes, world record holders, elite totals, professional athletes, Olympic athletes, you name it. It's been very fun to work with people from a huge variety of backgrounds. And what I've found to be true is that, as our name C3 Method hints to, is the customizable component when it comes to helping people reach their goals. Everyone's going to think it's nutrition. That is going to be the most common answer. But for a lot of the clients I've worked with, they were trying nutrition and it wasn't working. Because for them, actually, supplements, I'm going to expand on that here in a second, was actually what was holding them back, not the nutrition. And for others, the training was what was holding them back, not the nutrition. So I want to start with those examples first, since they're more so the examples that we probably wouldn't immediately have come to mind. When we look at supplements, I'm going to include within that category hormones. Now, you can impact your hormones with nutrition and training, but if we have a low thyroid, if we have low natural testosterone, or maybe our balance of testosterone and estrogen are off, if our hormonal profile, kind of the inner workings of our body, are not within normal range, and definitely then not going to be within optimal range, what we do with nutrition and training really can have minimal impact, and in some people's cases, it had no impact. There's one client I can think of specifically when I was thinking through examples of what to include in today's podcast, is they were in their early 20s. They had gotten out of the military, kind of getting a footing in life and figuring out what they wanted to do. They loved a regimen and consistency. They felt that helped them be their best version of themselves. So they decided to try to do a men's physique competition. They were already in okay shape. They were soft. They didn't have a ton of muscle. They weren't super lean, but they were physically fit, could do a lot of body weight movements, very good running distance, all that good stuff. They were physically fit. So they thought, okay, I'll just dial in my nutrition. Maybe if I switch over from body weight style training to a little bit of like weighted training, like weighted resistance training, I can get a harder physique and I'll do a competition. That could be super fun. They were thinking about maybe using that as motivation to get them to be a trainer. They were looking at some other kind of career options as well, but they dove into the nutrition and training component. They believed that they were eating really well and that they were training intensely. This is before we started working together. But what was the struggle for them was nothing really seemed to be changing. They would go month after month after month and their physique would look the same. Slightly soft, not really lean, not really strong. They weren't really getting bigger muscles. It seemed as though nothing was really changing. So they tried a couple different training styles. They did high intensity, low intensity, high volume, low volume. They tried every nutrition structure you can think of. I won't even go through and name them all, but high carb, low carb, high fat, low fat, high protein, moderate protein, low protein. They tried everything. And nothing ever seemed to change. Through a friend of a friend, they reached out to me and asked, hey, can you look over what I'm doing and give me an idea of what possibly I could be doing wrong? So they sent me their nutrition, they sent me their training, and at this point in their process, they had gotten things pretty skewed in the sense that the normal stuff hadn't been working, so they started trying just more and more weird stuff. So when I started looking at their nutrition, when they first came to me, I was like, oh man, you're at like 50% protein. There's not a lot of carbs. You're leaning more so into fats. I wouldn't say, if I had to give it a label, which I don't really like giving a label, it would have been more of like a carnivore style or like a kind of a keto version where they're leaning more into proteins and animal fats and very low carbs. And I said, hey, now what's your daily energy like? Is if you're doing weight training, have you tried doing more of a higher carb approach so that way you have better energy for the workouts? And they said, oh, yeah, I tried that. So then they sent me what that diet looked like. And they had been doing kind of the traditional bodybuilding model where it was, white fish and chicken and tons of rice and minimal fats. And I was like, well, what did your body look like then? So they sent me the photos of then, and it looked pretty much the same way it looked now with this higher protein, higher fat-based diet. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I said, so what have all you tried? Like, tell me everything you've tried. And they went through the whole list, and I was like, holy crap, okay, you've literally tried everything. I was like, what was your training methods? They went through the whole list, and I was like, holy crap, you've really tried everything. I said, have you gotten your blood work checked? And they said, I didn't really think about that. I'm in my 20s. I would assume that it was okay. And I said, well, that's, a reasonable assumption. However, you've tried what looks to be literally everything else. Why don't we just take a peek and see what's going on? So we got their blood work done, and their testosterone was like 180 something. That is incredibly, incredibly low. If we're looking at a quote-unquote normal range, the normal range is ridiculous, but it could be somewhere between, say, 300 to 1100. That's not optimal. Optimal is more like 800 to 1100 if you're looking at natural athletes. But they were way under 300, and 300 is like, if you're like 80, 90 years old. So in their 20s, they should definitely have been way above 300. And I was like, wow, man, this is like super duper duper low. We need to kind of deep dive into this a little bit and see what's going on. So we started talking about sleep quality, stress levels. They had a lot of stress, had some PTSD type issues related to what they had to do in the military. And we started kind of looking through and realizing that they were coping with the stress with other medications, and it was possibly impacting their natural testosterone production. And maybe they just in general never really had high natural testosterone production. We started working with a hormone clinic to increase their natural production of testosterone. So we weren't going to start injecting testosterone. We were just going to start with their kind of increasing their natural production first. And there's tons of compounds you can do with that. And the reason why is we wanted to stimulate natural production so that way they could kind of optimize their body's natural ability. This will also maintain fertility. They do want to have a family, and they were looking to get into competing in like their first ever competitions. You're going to want to kind of see what you can do naturally before you would jump onto exogenous sources of hormones and start to actually kind of compete against and shut off natural production. For them, given their age, given that this was a new hobby, new interest, they're not going to be making money out of it. This isn't like maybe going to be their career. They were just kind of learning their way into it. It was definitely better for us, especially given the age, to just increase natural production. So we started with that. We also started with supplements to improve sleep quality. We played around with testosterone support type supplements as well that are more so like over-the-counter type supplements. Within that change, I brought their protein down to between 25 to 33% of their total calories, depending on whether it was a training day, recovery day. Training day, we eat a little bit less. Recovery day, we eat a little bit more. And then we pushed more so into a higher kind of carb style diet where it's somewhere between 50 to 75% of carbohydrates, and then fats kind of fills in the rest. Now, that structure gave them really good energy. They started having better energy for workouts. They noticed that they could manage higher total volume load in their training, and they started feeling fuller. We started actually seeing a little bit more visible lines in the muscles, and that would be more so through glycogen replenishment. We were actually filling up the muscles now with glycogen, which before they would be considered flat or emptied, and that would contribute a lot to why their muscles never really looked to have any detail, and their training was okay, but it wasn't super intense. We pushed the volume up, we pushed the intensity up, we started getting them to train 5, 6, even 7 days a week. Now we had to modify the intensity and kind of break the body parts apart so that we weren't overdoing any kind of connective tissue stress, we weren't overdoing inflammation. That actually was helping them with psychological and emotional and mental health. It helped improve their sleep quality actually. It gave them something to kind of focus on every day. They really enjoyed that structure. Then, in the following, say, 6 months or so, we really started to see their weight starting to change. Their refinement of their physique started to show. We were starting to see a separation between like the shoulder cap, the bicep, the tricep, starting to see the love handles down at the kidneys, starting to taper in a little bit more. Their ab wall was starting to become more defined. They were finally starting to see the changes that they had always wanted. So for that client, if we're looking at nutrition, training, and supplements, and I did have a big caveat of putting hormones with supplements, so that was what was holding them back first, was the hormonal aspect, the supplement aspect. Their training and nutrition, they had tried literally everything, and nothing really seemed to work because training and nutrition was to produce a stimulus for change. How the body was going to make that change, like actually change the structures of the body, burn off the fat and keep the fat off, repair the muscle and build new tissues. The work of the change needed to be supported by the hormones, but it wasn't. So for them, that was what they needed the most. I look at another client, a female client. She had done three competitions before we met. I think one was bikini, then 2 were figure. And she had worked with previous coaches. And throughout that process, it was a good, 2 to 3 year process where she didn't have her period for the entire time. She was varying degrees of leanness, never lean enough for the show. For the quality that she wanted with her physique, but they had gotten down to under 1,000 calories, an hour plus of cardio, eating damn near nothing. They couldn't seem to whittle their body down to getting lean enough. Even though they kept pushing the body more and more and more, nutrition and training, they would take some supplements to help with digestion. There wasn't much to digest, so I'm not even sure what those supplements would have been. So by the time they reached out to me, it was because they had done their 3rd show and nothing really had improved from the first show. They knew a client of mine who we had done a show recently, and the friend had remarked on my client's change. She's like, holy crap, look how much you've changed over 6 months. I've been doing this for 2 years and I haven't even seen that. So they had started talking about what my client was doing, and my client was eating almost twice as much food. She wasn't doing, we were doing a little bit of cardio in the morning towards the very end of the show prep, but she wasn't doing an hour of cardio, and we didn't even need it the entire prep. So her friend was like, how are you getting away with this? Like, it seems as though you're not doing as much work as I am, but you're changing faster and you got leaner. So the friend, who is now a client, reached out and we started talking about her nutrition background, her training background, similar to the previous client. They had tried a little bit of everything. And then we got into the concept of, or the topic of supplements, and she mentioned that she's like, well, I haven't had my period for a while. And I said, oh, well, how long is a while? And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, she just got out of a show. Maybe she lost, her period the last month or 2. And she goes, 2 years. And I said, what? And she's like, I haven't had my period in 2 years. And I was like, whoa. And I was like, that even included like off seasons, or like, how did that happen? Like, what did that look like? And she was saying how for the first show they had dieted down, I think it was like 800 calories, and then they tried to kind of like quote unquote rebound diet out of that. But even when they only got up to like 1200 calories, she started gaining weight. And this was a big thing to unpack, was weight versus body fat. She had a really hard stigma based on those previous coaches' emphasis on weight versus her look. And it took us a while to work through the fact that she's going to be judged on her look, not her weight. We do want to track weight to have an idea of what the body's doing. And if you want to learn more about how to track body weight properly, just listen to our previous podcast. I talked about that. So for her, we had to break that down and really separate emotionally, mentally from body weight versus look. And what the previous coaches would see is she would do her show, and within 2 weeks she would gain like 12 pounds. And they were like, what are you doing? You're overeating, blah, blah, blah. And they would get really mad at her. They would put cardio right back in the program. And it's like, well, you gained 12 pounds because you guys had like water depleted. You were eating almost nothing. Your body's going to be completely flat of everything. Gaining 12 pounds back on a 120-pound physique really isn't that much in 2 weeks after a show. That's actually probably totally fine, and your body needed that. It would have needed that to regain healthy hormone profile to probably start to come back to getting your period. But they kept yo-yoing her food. She was like to 800 for the first show, then up to 1,200, but they freaked out there, so they brought her back down to 1,000, added a ton of cardio. She said that she felt like crap and was feeling miserable, so like, okay, let's take the cardio out. But they had never really let her get back above 1,400 calories for 2 years. And they kept pushing the cardio, pushing the weight training. She was training 6-7 days a week. It was lower body like every day, which was overkill, especially like less than 1,400 calories. What is she going to grow anything with? So they were wanting to grow her glutes, and it's like, well, you don't have any material. Trying to build a brick house with one brick. You're not going to have much of a house. So we had to separate all that out. We had to get her hormones back under control. So I had her do the same thing as with the other client. Go get your hormones checked, get your blood work checked. Thyroid was pretty crappy. Hormones were all out of whack. So we started getting her hormonal support again for natural production. We then started to play around with the food in the sense of using around, again, that 25 to 33% kind of protein mark. She did better with more fats than carbs. And that was more of an emotional, mental control. The fluctuation of carbohydrates caused fluctuation of body weight, which is normal, which she had a hard time separating from being a negative thing, especially given the fact that the previous years, those coaches would harp on her and yell at her when her weight changed, which was absolutely ridiculous. We then favored more fats to have more of a consistency to the body weight and sprinkled in the carbs around training so she would have okay energy. We started to see her physique tighten up, actually. Her body weight didn't change much, but her upper arms, especially like that armpit area between like your breast and your front of your shoulder, that armpit area started to tighten up, and it didn't have as many like wrinkles and that looseness there. She also had less loose skin on the lower part of her butt, and her like saddlebag area, the outer part of the thighs, started tapering in up at the upper thigh. So we started getting more of a nice like almond shape to her thigh rather than a V or like a cone where it looks really narrow at the knee but really thick and wide at the hip. So we started now getting this almond shape. Her lower back has come in, the belly has come in. She's much flatter in her stomach now because she's not having bloat and distension and all these other digestive issues, which was coming from really low calories but high fiber, which is what the coaches had her on previously. With her, the nutrition and the hormones, the supplements, were the main components. Her training was actually pretty good. We did have to back off on as much freaking glute work. She didn't need to train glutes 7 days a week. We did want to work more on shoulders to get more of a cap because she's now moving into wellness, which is a division that emphasizes more lower body dominance, thicker glutes, thicker thighs. You want to have a nice shoulder cap, a little bit of back detail, but it's definitely more of a lower body dominant physique. That matched actually what she wants to look like when she's not on stage. So she had asked me, she said, which division do you think I should compete in? And I said, what division do you want to look like? I was like, you're only going to get on stage, roughly once or twice a year. What do you want to look like for the other 363 days of the year? So that's what we chose, is wellness. So for her, the start of the change came from supplements. It came from looking at her hormones. Without us having done that, without us getting her thyroid into a healthier place, getting her hormones into a healthier place, the process in which the body can make the adaptations that we're stimulating through nutrition and training, that process would have been slowed, delayed, and damn near showed nothing. This is very common actually for a lot more people than what would have been maybe earlier in my career. I think there's just more awareness. And so again, I started this when I was 16. That's 26 years ago. 26 years ago, people didn't talk too much about blood work when it came to body transformations. Nowadays, we're definitely more aware of that, and we have more methods to influence it. We have easier access to those type of supportive prescriptions and supplements and drugs. It's a much healthier than it's been environment for us to start to play with those numbers, look at those numbers, and actually influence those numbers. If you are someone who believes that you have followed nutrition structures well, and you've even tried maybe a variety of them, you've followed different training programs and you were adherent to them very well. So you're doing nutrition well, you're doing training well, but you're not seeing the changes that you would expect. I would encourage you to look at your hormones. And again, I'm kind of fudging the three topics: nutrition, training, supplements. You might not have thought of hormones being included in supplements, but it does make sense for it to be included there. I would encourage you to get your blood work checked and kind of see where your body's hormonal profile is at, to see if it is even in a healthy place to make the adaptations that we're stimulating through nutrition and training. I have plenty more examples of clients where the supplementation was the issue, but we'll move on now. And I want to look at training. For these clients, their hormones were okay. Their nutrition was okay. I'm not going to say it was perfect, because, damn near whose is, but it wasn't even like typical expectations for a competitive aesthetic athlete. Say bikini, wellness, there's fit model, women's physique, and then there you have men's divisions, classic physique, classic bodybuilding, and then regular bodybuilding. Those people, they eat very clean, very strict every day, all day, but even they make mistakes from time to time. For regular people, we're looking at, hey, they're doing their best. They're eating pretty clean most days of the week. Let's say 5 out of 7 days a week. They're doing a really good job. Once or twice a week, they just have a date night, a fun night, or maybe they just freaking want some pizza or ice cream and they just eat off their plate. So for regular people, one of the clients I'm thinking of right now, she was doing that well. Her and her husband were dieting together. They were trying various methods. They had tried Mediterranean diet, keto diet, Atkins, you name it, high carb, low carb, high fat, low fat, all that stuff. They had tried a little bit of everything. And her hormones were okay. Now, she had been through 2 pregnancies, but the hormones were actually still within normal ranges. They weren't in optimal ranges, but they were in normal ranges. Normal thyroid, normal estrogen, testosterone, and all that. So I started asking her questions. She had expressed that she was struggling to lose weight. Their weight had just kind of plateaued. And I was like, well, let's look at what we're doing and what we can modify. We looked at the nutrition. She was feeling pretty burned out, pretty overwhelmed, pretty stressed already with having tried a million nutrition structures. She wanted to keep things very simple and give herself some grace to not have to be perfect, because she felt that that was going to make her kick into like an all or nothing type approach, to where like, if I can't be perfect, I might as well give up everything and just gain 30 pounds back. And I was like, okay, well, let's clean up a few things, let's simplify a few things. So we're just tracking protein and calories, and she can have whatever carbs she wants, whatever fat she wants, as long as her total calorie intake is controlled, and as long as we meet our minimum protein intake. And then she can have 3 meals a day, 4 meals a day, 5 meals a day, doesn't matter. The more she kind of spreads them out over the day, the better it is for digestion, overall look, and water retention and whatnot. But she's open with that. Then we looked at her supplements. She was doing okay with general health supplements. If we look at that, we're looking at multivitamin, vitamin D3, K2, fish oil, stuff like that, some basic kind of just good, healthy body type supplements. For her, where we found the room that we could improve was in her training. She was paying attention to her step count, getting somewhere between 5,000 to 10,000 a day. And for her, that was an effort. 5,000 is not a lot of steps. And especially in lighter body weight individuals, male or female, the lighter your body weight, the less meaningful steps are for fat loss. You just don't burn a lot of calories. And once you're done walking, the body's kind of done with any demand from that activity. If we were to introduce weight training, she can burn calories while lifting weights, and then also she'll burn more calories while her body's trying to recover from lifting weights. And then over time, if she's able to build more muscle tissue we have allows us to have a higher caloric demand just at rest during the day, all day. She will also have more muscle mass that she has to fuel while walking, so her step count becomes more meaningful. And then also recovery demand. The body has to fix and repair those muscles, and that can increase calories as well. Now that is a process, especially in females, that can take 6 months to 12 months for it to be somewhat appreciable or significant. But if we're gonna take 6 to 12 months and do walking, we might as well take 6 to 12 months and do weight training and get all these benefits increasingly more so over time. She had the difficulty of, she really didn't have the ability to go to the gym on a consistent basis. She maybe can get out of the house and go to a gym once or twice a week, depending on her and her husband's schedule. They have some young kids. The husband works out of the house. She is fortunate to be able to work in the house, which means that she's kind of stuck at the house a lot. At their house, they didn't really have anything to exercise with, and I asked them, hey, why don't we make a little bit of an investment? Why don't we get some dumbbells? Why don't we get some stuff? So we got a couple bands, exercise bands they could use. We also got what's called a hip circle, which is a band you put around your knees or lower body, and you can train your glutes in various ways. We got some dumbbells off of Facebook Marketplace and put together a little bit of a home gym in her living room. So now the routine is she wakes up before the kids do. She puts on a little bit of music in her headphones and crushes a 20-30 minute workout. We have it structured with circuits, so she'll set a timer. She does anywhere between 3 to 5 movements in rotation, so back to back to back to back to back. Takes a little bit of a breath, whatever she needs, and just kind of gets as many rounds in as she can in 20 to 30 minutes. It's going really well. She's freaking loving it. She now has a little bit of personal time, that little bit of me time in the mornings before the world wakes up and causes chaos in her day. That has now been what has stimulated change. It has allowed her to feel more motivated, more excited. She has that emotional mental time. That's carrying over to her having better adherence in her nutrition. She's actually more willing to push herself in the nutrition aspect, demand more of herself, now that she's seeing and feeling the results from the training. Supplement-wise, we're just maintaining those basic healthy supplements, but she is now progressing forward. Her body aesthetics are changing. She's down, I think, 1 or 2 pant sizes, and overall, she's very happy. So if we look at what mattered most for her, her nutrition was already maxing out what she could emotionally and mentally handle. The supplements were whatever they needed to be. Her hormones and body was fine. She, taking extra creatine or taking a fat burner, which is just caffeine and water diuretic, wouldn't really have made much of a long-term impact. What made the difference for her was adding in resistance training. Getting rid of the step count as being the dominant training modality and using resistance training. That is a great example. Now, I look at another example for training. Let's see here. Let me scan through my notes. I have another person. Okay, so there was a female client, and she was struggling with not binging and purging. I've worked with people with eating disorders, like anorexia and bulimia and whatnot. She wasn't doing the purging, but she would severely undereat for multiple days and then just have horrible, horrible cravings and eventually just eat all of her kids' foods one day. So she would be, maybe making, chicken nuggets for the kids, and they eat a few, but now all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of leftovers. She would lose her mind one night, eat all of that in a pint of ice cream. And then she'd hate herself, tell herself, a bunch of negative things, and then she'd starve herself for a couple more days. So what we found was, for her, is that the nutrition was very high-low, very extreme, very stressful. Whenever she found herself to feel restricted with nutrition. She had a very visceral response emotionally. She fought that very aggressively. What this led to was she struggled to follow any diet because once she felt like she had a diet structure that she was accountable to, her body would freak out, she'd have emotions of feeling trapped, and she would eventually break out of that. Then again, when she broke out of it, she would over-restrict, then overeat, over-restrict, overeat. Supplement-wise, she was okay. Hormones weren't great, but they weren't out of whack. They were in the normal range, not optimal, but normal. We started talking about what she could do with nutrition. That was what she came to me for. And I said, well, there's definitely some stuff we can unpack, but I kind of want to ask you a question first. One of the questions I have is, what is your schedule like? Do you have capacity to lift weights? She had been a former CrossFit athlete, 10 plus years ago, hadn't lifted weights in a while, got busy with family and work, and they moved a few times cross country and all this stuff. I said, would you like to get back to lifting? You're an athlete at nature. You were a college athlete. You used to love CrossFit, you said. You just haven't done it for a while. The reason why I ask is if we were to embrace training as a new activity, that can burn off a lot of calories for us to where you don't have to eat such low amount of calories with your nutrition. If we're looking at body fat control, for us to lose body fat, we either have to eat less or move more. She was only looking at the eat less component. And as soon as she started to eat less, her body would freak out. I said, well, why don't we eat the same, but move more? Why don't we get our calorie deficit to promote fat loss through movement rather than caloric restriction? And she's like, well, I hadn't really thought of that. And part of the reason why is through her pregnancies, she had some issues with incontinence, so controlling her urine, and she was afraid to kind of get back into heavy lifting. She also had some lower back pain due to abdominal weaknesses. She never really was able to correct diastasis recti, which is the thinning and weakening of the abdominal wall through her pregnancies. I was like, why don't we do some at-home stuff? Let me help you work on pelvic floor control, abdominal strength. Let's loosen the glutes and adductors to help decrease some of that stress in your lower back. So we started doing some at-home therapies and at-home workouts. And what she found was, okay, she could now do crunch variations and not pee a little bit every time she did a crunch. She could start to do planks. She was starting to do vacuums while she was sitting at work. We really started seeing progression in abdominal strength. We then started doing some goblet hold squats at home, some reverse lunges, some weighted movements, and she was like, wow, I'm feeling a lot better. My lower back doesn't hurt. I'm not having any, urinary issues. And I was like, well, you excited for the gym yet? You want to go back and give it a shot? So I connected her with somebody I knew from where she lives with a CrossFit gym, and she started doing CrossFit workouts. That was amazing. She's absolutely loving it. She's back into a community and enjoying that. What that allowed then was for her food, we just had to eat quote unquote normal. We had to eat middle of the road. Let's not do an over restriction, but we also have to control our overconsumption. So we do have to have some form of accountability and awareness of what we're eating. We want to stay in the middle. The more we control going high, the less we have to go low to counter that. So really, we're not tracking to see how low we can go. We're tracking to make sure we don't go too high. And that little bit of mental framework change helped a lot because she didn't feel restricted in that she had to hit these low numbers. And was she going to be able to do that and still have the energy for the kids? Was she going to be able to do that and not feel like crap all day? Now it was like, hey, just, eat what you want, but just don't go over this number. And she was like, oh, okay, well, I can do that. And then all of a sudden I started seeing, okay, well, she was allowed to go to that number, but now she had a couple of days where she was 200, 300, 400 calories lower than that number consistently. And she's like, well, I thought if I push a little bit lower, I might get fat loss. And I was like, ooh, yes, you're right. But now she was choosing to do that, not feeling like she had to do that. And that was the change that really started making everything progress for us, was adding in training. The supplements, we just had to make sure she had general health supplements. Hormones were fine. The nutrition was already so sensitized, so pressured, so far skewed that we didn't really want to look at that, because looking at that would have caused her to almost shut down completely. So adding in the training component was what allowed us to start to create change, start to create momentum, and then that allowed us to expand back into the nutrition and start to make the changes we needed there. So these are awesome examples of how, if we look at what matters most and we think of nutrition, training, or supplements, everybody's going to think nutrition. That's the most common answer I got on Instagram. Actually, no one answered training or supplements. Only everybody answered nutrition. But I wanted to give the examples in which the supplements area and the training area were what was allowing us to make the change that we wanted, that the person needed. So if you are struggling to make progress towards your goals, and especially if you're attacking nutrition, but it doesn't seem to be working, or it seems to be too stressful, looking at the training component, looking at the supplements and hormonal component might be a better area to start. That might be a place where if we start there, we can start to create momentum, start to create progression, and then get into the nutrition as we go. Now, there are tons of examples where nutrition was the problem. I'm definitely not saying that's not the problem. And for a lot of people, that is, out of the 3 areas, what is most important. Usually what I see there is a lot of inconsistent eating. People will over-restrict and then overeat. They'll miss some meals some days and eat really clean and crisp on other days. But if you track them over 28 days, half the time, maybe 50%, they're actually following their diet. The other 50%, there's something that's a little bit off. And when you start to look at that, you're like, okay, we have the pressure of the diet every day, but we're not actually following the diet every day. So that's something I do look at for people, is adherence to a diet. There is, as much of it as I could possibly emphasize via words, there is a difference between feeling the pressure of a diet versus following the diet. We can be aware of a diet. I'm aware that I'm supposed to be on a diet. I'm aware of what my diet is. But that does not mean we are following the diet. You do need to track your efforts. You need to track the data. 100% of the time, 100% of the time, people's perception of their adherence is different than the actuality of their adherence. I'm looking like, are there exceptions? Sure. Are you going to assume that you're the exception? Abso-freaking-lutely you are. But are you the exception? Hell no, you're definitely not. Track what you're doing. If you're not tracking your calories every day, if you're not tracking your diet parameters every day, you will not be as adherent as you think you are. If you don't believe me, just track it and then you'll find out I'm right. If you don't want to find out that you're not as adherent as you are, then you're going to be stubborn, you're not going to track, you're just going to believe that you're special and that you're actually doing everything correctly, and then you're still not going to make any progress and you're still never going to reach your goals. So you can be right and never reach your goals, or you can track your efforts for a week and find out what's really happening. So that's your choice. Getting a little grumpy here, poking at you a little bit. So for a lot of people, my answer to this, like which is most important, nutrition, training, supplements, why in the world would you pick one? That's my answer. Is look at all three. Look at all three areas. Look at every area you can look at. If we're looking at these three options, dive into all three of them. Make sure you're doing something in each of these areas. You might find that, okay, there isn't much ground for you to improve in training, but maybe you can do a lot with nutrition or supplements, or vice versa, or versa vice, or whatever the heck you'd say, among three different options. So any combination of that stuff is, there's going to be one area you could probably improve a lot, one area that you're probably actually doing okay in, and then the other one, who knows, toss up. But I would look at all these areas. I would definitely get your blood work done if you haven't done that. Check and see where your hormones are. Make sure they're at least in the normal range. And then if you really want to be, awesome at everything, try to get them up into optimal. There's tons of therapies and support you can get for that. If you have any questions, just reach out to me. You can send an email to C3Method. The 3 is spelled out T-H-R-E-E, so C-T-H-R-E-E method. And you can send that to gmail.com. You can get our website, which is C3Method.com. You can find us on Instagram and send me a message there. However you do it, whatever you do it, just do it if you have any questions. So hormones, definitely want to look at that. And then like over-the-counter supplements and stuff, that's usually just kind of supplemental. It's an additional to your training and nutrition. You definitely want to look at training and nutrition first, maximize those, and then the supplements would kind of have a better effect. But if you're only doing over-the-counter supplement changes, it's probably not going to produce much of a change unless you look at your nutrition and training as well. So really look at all three areas: hormones, over-the-counter supplements. We're going to couple that up together. Then look at your training and look at your nutrition and see, okay, in these areas, what are some aspects that I can maybe improve? Definitely improve my adherence to whatever my current program is. If I am adherent to my current program, but it's still not working, then maybe you got to look at a different program. So reach out if you have any questions. Hopefully this was helpful to hear the stories of clients who have had various experiences and maybe not always the experience that people would assume. Awesome. Well, if you need anything, reach out in the millions of ways that I've already expressed. If you like the podcast, please share the podcast. The more people we share it with, the more people can help. I appreciate you listening. I hope it's helpful. That's why I'm doing it. If you need anything, let me know.